Obviously, start everyone tier one. We don't need to talk about him. The only thing I will say is the king is back. Maybe it's a little aggressive putting him at one, but honestly, he played every freaking snap against the Bucs. You have a great matchup against the Seahawks. It projects out to be the second best offense in the NFL this week. So yeah, we're throwing CMC at one. Now going down to tier two, we are going to be looking at Breece Hall leading us off. Now, of course, we have consistently seen the New York Jets disappoint over and over and over again. But this week going up against the Indianapolis Colts, what is interesting is for whatever reason, sportsbook, so I will reiterate, they know more than I do. They know more than you do. They know more than everyone. They currently have the Jets as 4-point favorites. They currently have an implied team total about 24.5 points for the New York Jets. So surprisingly, this Jets offense is supposed to be decent this week and what should be a decent matchup, of course, going up against the Indianapolis Colts. And while Breece has been very disappointing, you still have had the consistent target volume. Like the man at the end of the day is sitting here with only one game this season with fewer than 4 targets. So the offense is supposed to be a little bit better. And at the same time, you still have the receiving usage. I think you can call him a must-start option. Now, going over to our next player, we are going to be looking at Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, currently, the Detroit Lions project out to be the highest scoring team in the NFL this week, according to sportsbooks, where you're looking at an implied team total of 30 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, Gibbs has been phenomenal all season. I will say that if the Lions boat race the Jags here, which is a very high possibility. There's like a 13-point spread on this game. Very easily could be a game where you get a lot of David Montgomery. Kenneth Walker will be our next running back. If you're looking at Walker, the Seahawks are almost touchdown dogs against the Niners. Obviously, this is a very bad matchup against the Niners. However, with that being said, we actually have seen some games previously this year where the Seattle Seahawks trail from start to finish. You get 50-plus dropbacks from Geno Smith, and what you end up seeing is you actually see a lot of targets going in the direction of Kenneth Walker and an insane amount of usage as a receiver. So with that in mind, I think that could potentially save Kenneth Walker here in fantasy. And if you are looking at what he's done so far this season, it's a running back that's only had one game with fewer than 10 fantasy points and 2 games with fewer than 15. Now, our next option will be Jonathan Taylor. Taylor gets you the 114 rushing yards this past week, but still, when you don't have the receiving usage, it's not a spot where we can say that we are super excited about him in a full PPR format. And also with this, the Colts are 4-point dogs against the Jets, so you very easily could see the Indianapolis Colts not able to run the ball in the second half. Chase Brown will be our next running back. With Chase Brown, if you told me Mason is going to see another 80+% of the snaps here in Cincinnati, I would actually put Chase Brown potentially at the very top of this tier. Obviously, over the past 2 weeks, the usage has been insane. You had 24 opportunities this past week against Baltimore, including 11 targets out of the backfield. The week prior, you had 32 opportunities against the Las Vegas Raiders. The man over the past 2 weeks with no Zach Moss has had over 80% of the snaps. He's averaging 15 carries a game. He's averaging 8 targets a game. He's been incredible. My only thing is, if you have Khalil Herbert with this team through the entire week, do we see a little less usage from Chase Brown? Now, of course, I still expect him to be a 3-down running back with a massive receiving role and a must-start option. But does he come down from 87% of the snaps here closer to 60 to 70%? Now, David Montgomery will be our next running back. If you're looking at Montgomery, well, yes, you only have 2 games this year with 50% or more of the snaps. It just freaking doesn't matter. You're running behind the best offensive line in the NFL. You're averaging almost a touchdown a game. And this is the best matchup you could possibly ask for, where again, the Lions project out score more points than any other team in the NFL this week, according to Las Vegas sportsbooks, while at the same time, you actually have a 13-point spread. So we can assume, yeah, they're just going to be running the ball over and over and over again. Now, our next option is going to be Aaron Jones. With Aaron Jones, obviously, there's a pretty big asterisk on this. He did get banged up, but with that being said, it does seem like he is going to play this week, or at least earlier reports are saying that he's day-to-day, expected to not miss any time. Now, obviously, if Aaron Jones were to miss, then at that point, we would say that Akers is probably the backup, but Akers wouldn't be anywhere close to this high in the weekly ranks. Now, our next option will be Josh Jacobs. With Jacobs, it's a tougher matchup going up against Chicago, where typically you're used to seeing maybe, I mean, an implied team total of 25, 26 points here for Green Bay. Typically, they project out to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. This is a spot where it's just a tougher matchup going up against the Bears. This game does have a very low total in general, a total that is hovering around 40 points. And you have an implied team total of only about 23.5 points for the Packers. So it's a tougher matchup, but they should be able to run the ball very easily. So if you wanted to go with the Josh Jacobs higher than 71.5 rushing yards on Underdog Fantasy, I'm not going to fault you at all for that. I actually will like that a lot more than DeAndre Swift, who is higher, lower 63.5 rushing yards, just because the expectations are that the Packers very easily win this game. They are touchdown favorites. But of course, if you wanted to check out either of those pick'ems over there on Underdog, you can find that link in the description or comment section. Promo code FLOCK is going to hook you up with a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, you're going to be getting a free Jalen Hurts pick, more than less than half a total yard for the Thursday night game, and a free team review in the live stream that we are doing every single night as well. Now, going over to our next option, we are going to have two running backs that are supposed to be in a lower scoring game than usual. We are going to have James Cook as well as Kareem Hunt. Now, if you're looking at both of these backs, obviously they are typically higher than this in our rankings. But right now, the Kansas City Chiefs have allowed the fewest points to opposing running backs so far this season. And typically, we're used to seeing the Buffalo Bills with an implied team total up at 25, 26, 27 points, and it's down only at 24 because of how tough this matchup is. And likewise, if you're looking at the Kansas City Chiefs, typically, we are used to seeing this team with an implied team total of 25, 26, 27 points, projecting out to be one of the highest scoring offenses in the NFL. However, in a very tough matchup against Buffalo here, you actually only have an implied team total of 21.5. Now, it kind of saves Kareem Hunt, where we are able to still rank him absolutely as a must-start running back in the vast majority of formats, is the fact that the man still had 10 targets last week in the game environment against Denver, where the rushing attempts really weren't there. So it is really nice to see the uptick in the receiving usage that we've had from Kareem Hunt, where previously that wasn't really the case the prior month. Now, dropping down to our next tier, obviously Dobbins is lower in the rankings this week than he was prior. But a big reason for that is it looks like Gus Edwards is back and is going to have a role. Now, obviously, you can tell by these rankings, I expect Dobbins to very easily be the starting running back here in this offense. Like right now, you're looking at the snap rate that we had last week being 66%. And I think that this should be about expectations going into the future. And obviously, Gus Edwards has had one target all season. Gus Edwards is not a running back that's going to catch the ball in this offense. He never caught the ball in Baltimore. So Dobbins will be the receiving back. It's a game environment where you're going up against the Bengals. And while, yes, the Chargers are technically favored in this game, you very easily could see Justin Herbert actually being forced to the ball and getting more Dobbins in comparison to Edwards with what we had last week. Now, Brian Robinson will be our next option. Now, Brian Robinson's been at practice all week. Earlier reports are saying that he is going to be able to play here against the Eagles. But this is another spot where typically we're used to seeing Washington project out, score 25, 26 points every week with their implied team total. That's down at 22.5. I don't know if it's because it's the Thursday night game. I don't know if it's because it's a tough matchup going up against Philly. But regardless, a lower total than usual, while at the same time, I mean, it's not an unusual thing that Brian Robinson is practicing earlier in the week. I mean, we saw it last week. We saw it the week prior. The man's been practicing over and over and over again. And the last time we saw him play 50+% of the snaps was back in week 4. So, I don't know. They should have just threw him on the IR immediately when he suffered the hamstring. But it looks like he's going to play this week. Now, I know it may seem like we are extremely low on DeAndre Swift to have him down here behind guys like Dobbins and Robinson, but it's just a brutal matchup. I mean, you're going up against the Green Bay Packers, where the Packers are almost touchdown favorites. The Bears are absolutely collapsing. The only offenses that project to score more points this week, according to sportsbooks, or let's go, the only offenses projected to score fewer points are the Titans, the Cowboys, the Jags, and that may be it. That's about it. You have the Bears projected out to be a bottom 5 offense in the NFL this week. And I have Swift in the flock league, to be completely honest with you. I'm going to look to sell this dude. I may try to send him to Sal with Brock Purdy to get to Josh Allen because Sal really needs a DeAndre Swift type running back. I saw recently on his buy low video that DeAndre Swift was on the thumbnail, so I'm going to try to swing that because if you look at the schedule going forward with DeAndre Swift, I mean, the next 4 games include like the Niners, the Vikings, the Lions, and then you have to play the Vikings and Lions twice. It's brutal for Chicago. Rhamondre Stevenson will be our next back. With Rhamondre, to be completely honest with you, I probably should have him higher than this in these rankings. This is actually the best that we have seen the Patriots project out pretty much all season with an implied team total of 19.5 points. Now, I don't know if this is just because I'm freaking burned from Rhamondre Stevenson this year. I have no idea what to ever expect from the dude. I mean, right now you're sitting with 4 games with fewer than 10 fantasy points, but at the same time, you have 4 games with 20 or more. So Rhamondre's giving you a bunch of usable weeks. The issue is he's giving you a bunch of duds as well. I will say it's a fine matchup. Not only is it a fine matchup, but again, I mean, very rarely are you going to see the Patriots offense project out this nicely. Now, of course, the Patriots are dogs in this game by about 5 points, but that's normal. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go with Najee Harris. With Najee, we talked about this a lot, but Warren coming back in obviously was going to take receiving usage. And you actually see Najee Harris this past week with the total of 0 targets. Now, of course, Najee gets injured in the game. And we're going to have a massive asterisk on this ranking because we don't know the availability of Najee Harris right this second. Of course, I'll continue to update the rankings on the site, and I'll update the rankings with another video later on this week. Tony Pollard will be our next back here. With Pollard, again, we talked about the usage coming down dramatically with Tyjae Spears coming back into this offense. That's exactly what happened. Where, I mean, the prior month with Pollard, you had 20, 22, 24, and 31 total opportunities. This past week, you only have 13. And yet again, this is a week where the Tennessee Titans project out to be the worst offense in the NFL with an implied team total of only 16.75 points. It's a brutal matchup going up against Minnesota, and Spears is taking more of the backfield. Obviously, Pollard's starter. You can see that by the rankings. Nick Chubb will be our next option. With Chubb, if you look at the actual carries that he's had over the past 3 weeks, it's kind of encouraging. You've seen 11, 16, and 15. But the issue is it's a bad offense and you don't have a receiving role. So I don't know if we can be excited about you at all. Now, coming out of the bye week, of course, we're going to assume another week healthier, maybe ramp up the role just a bit. I am surprised to see, though, that against the Saints here, I was actually expecting the Browns to project very poorly and kind of be in a similar boat as what you have with the Chicago Bears. But sportsbooks are telling us that this Browns offense is much better than that. You have an implied team total about 21.5 points, which is actually kind of right in line with what you have with the Kansas City Chiefs this week. A lot of it is matchup based, of course. Now, Rico Dowdle will be the next back here. I mean, if you're looking at Dowdle, I apologize. Dallas was another one of those teams that projected out be a worse offense than Chicago. You have an implied team total of 17 points. You have a spread on this game that's 7.5. It's going to be very difficult for the Dallas Cowboys offense to move the ball down the field. I know a lot of people got upset when we talked about this turning into the Miami Dolphins with no Tua, and that's exactly what the Dallas Cowboys are without Dak here. Consistently, you're going to see them project out to be at the very bottom of the NFL in total points scored. I will say, saving grace with Dowdle is you did have, 9 targets over the past 2 weeks, so you have some cheap receptions in a full PPR league. Now, the last 2 tiers, I am just going to beg you, for the love of God, do not start anybody here. Travis Etienne may technically be the starter in Jacksonville, but you are a 13-point dog in what projects out to be one of the worst offenses in the NFL. He played 68% of the snaps this past week, but also Tank Bigsby did leave the game at a point due to an injury. It's a horrible matchup. It's a horrible offense. Etienne, so far this season, has 0 games with 15 or more fantasy points. Going over to our next option with Audric Estime, I would have to kind of rank him over Javonte Williams at this point. Now, what's very surprising, and you're going to see this with our quarterback rankings later in the week, is this is the best we have seen this Denver Broncos offense project out since they played the Carolina Panthers back about a month ago. So you would say, okay, implied team total 23.5 points. Right now they are actually favored over the Atlanta Falcons here, which obviously shows what I know. I thought that would be flipped. But anyway, they may be able to run the ball in the second half. It looks like Estime is going to be the first and second down back, and Javonte is going to be the guy on third downs. But obviously, it's no guarantee. I would rather bench both options right now. You actually currently have the Vegas Raiders projected to get steamrolled by the Dolphins. The Dolphins have been very bad all season, but they're 8-point favorites here over the Raiders. So, I don't know if you'd be excited about the starting running back in the Raiders offense regardless, but it's not even guaranteed to be Alexander Mattison, where before the bye week, you only had 39% of the snaps for Madison. So, I mean, you committee back in a horrible offense. Austin Ekeler will be our next play. Obviously, Ekeler absolutely crushed this past week when the man had 2 rushing touchdowns. Really saves us in some spots where we drafted him on Underdog this year. But the thing with Ekeler is the receiving usage hasn't been as good as what you would want to imagine. He's had 1 game with 5 or more targets. And keep in mind, over the past month, you really haven't seen any Brian Robinson. And obviously, we're making these rankings under the assumption that Brian Robinson plays. If he misses, Ekeler is going to fly up these. He'll probably be in the same tier as Dobbins. And again, if Najee Harris misses, Jalen Warren's going to fly up these as well. But as it stands, if we think that Najee plays, Warren's a running back that has had 0 games with 10 fantasy points this year. And then dropping down to our last tier, just for the love of God, I didn't even think about how we rank these guys that hard. I just, please beg you, do not start Tyler Algier. Do not start Gus Edwards. Do not start Ray Davis. Do not start Tank Bigsby. Do not start Roshan Johnson. Do not start Tajee Spears. Do not start Raheem Mostert. Do not start Braylon Allen. These are running backs that you can definitely roster if you think that an injury ahead of them could turn them into must-start options. But as it stands now, under the assumption that all their starters are fully healthy, I really don't have any interest whatsoever. But I really hope I was able to help you out with this. Of course, if you haven't done so already, hit that like, subscribe to the channel. And if you wanted to check out any of those picks on Underdog Fantasy, I am actually being tempted with how bad this Bears offense is to go against our guy and go lower than 63.5 rushing yards on DeAndre Swift. But you can find that link to Underdog in the description in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Plus, we get that free Jalen Hurts pick, more than less than half a total yard for the Thursday night game. And on top of that, you're going to be getting a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night. Just make sure you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your account on Underdog Fantasy. That way, we're able to credit you with your free team review voucher. But thank you again. I really appreciate you, and I really hope we get to see you out with the live stream later tonight.